Utopia, dystopia, and today's technology hosted by Johannes Katzner, bringing a global conversation discussing technologies that affect us
Hello and welcome to the show. I am Johannes, and I am very happy today to be speaking with Olivia Gambelin, who is the CEO and founder of Ethical Intelligence. Which has essentially two parts to it. It is both a company that has ethics as a service, and Olivia will tell us more about what that is. And then it also has an expert network attached to it, which I probably want to join. So then here, I also want to say that I met Olivia through a common friend of ours, Nick Larson. And as we were speaking, it was apparent that she should be on the show. Before we get into the conversation, I want to clarify a few terms that will occur in this conversation frequently. I do this via the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, from which I will read a short paragraph. Virtue ethics is currently one of three major approaches in normative ethics. It may initially be identified as the one that emphasizes the virtues or moral character, in contrast to the approach that emphasizes duties or rules, deontology, or that emphasizes the consequences of actions, consequentialism. Suppose it is obvious that someone in need should be helped, a utilitarian, a type of consequentialist to be sure, will point to the fact that the consequences of doing so will maximize well-being. A deontologist to the fact that in doing so, the agent will be acting in accordance with a moral rule, such as do others as he would be done by. And a virtue ethicist to the fact that helping the person would be charitable or benevolent. This is not to say that only virtue ethicists attend to virtues any more than it is to say that only consequentialists attend to consequences or only deontologists to rules. Each of the above mentioned approaches can make room for virtues, consequences, and rules. We will see this in the course of the conversation when Olivia Gambelin will often refer to outcomes, which is a consequentialist idea. And that confuses me at some point. You will see that as well. So I often refer to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy as a quick reference when I am not sure about a term or when I want to know a particular approach. Of course, that is not to say that this is a substitute for books or for the Western canon or for any of the canons in philosophy. There's also something you could do in between those two, a short reference versus reading all the books, and that is to read Bertrand Russell's A History of Western Philosophy. This is a highly recommended book. It is recommended by Noam Chomsky and by many other intellectuals. This book has also made its own contribution to philosophy, and outlining the philosophy of Bertrand Russell, who contrasts his own philosophy with those philosophies of the historical philosophers of the Western canon. And so then I want to also say here that I really find this quote quite thought-provoking that you have on your website, which says that good technology does not take advantage of our human nature. It's tech that helps us embrace the nature of being human. And so for that, I want to start the show right away with asking you, what do you mean by human nature? Because this is a hotly debated issue, whether it exists at all. And of course, from Noam Chomsky, we know that there is a certain limit to what the range of human experiences can possibly be in language and probably also in ethical thinking. And therefore, there must be something to it. But what it is, it seems to be quite contentious where it lies. So please give us a little bit of an introduction of what you mean by human nature and how does it apply in technology.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me today, Johannes. It's great to be here. So to unpack really what I mean by human nature, this, I guess the best approach for this is starting with artificial intelligence, actually, which sounds a little bit funny of a place to start, but artificial intelligence is based off of really kind of our understanding of to me, what is a limited scope of human intelligence, how we process analytically. But that is not just our only way of processing as humans. We also have emotional inputs. We have emotional reasoning. We have spatial logic. We have spatial reasoning. We have different types of intelligence. And one of the types of intelligence that we have as people is actually moral, ethical intelligence. And this is our ability to sense and feel, well, both emotions, but also sense morals. So the difference between right and wrong, good and bad. Our intelligence in being able to understand this dichotomy that exists in life, that's what is essentially our ethical intelligence, not actually to quote my company name. That's a little bit different. But to me, to bring it back around to your question, what I mean by human nature is the combination, the group of all of our different types of intelligences. That means that it is incorporating our ability to logically reason, our analytical processing. It incorporates our emotional understanding. It incorporates those existential questions we have as humans of what the heck are we doing here. It covers the whole gauntlet. We as humans are messy.
But all of them, so all
Yes.
of what you just said, for example, especially what is right or wrong, or what is the good life, those questions they don't have a natural answer to them, do they?
No, I mean, yes and no. What is a good life? A good life, and what I'll define a good life is a life full of purpose and fulfillment. What that means for each individual person is different. That's what I find very beautiful about it, is there is a universal truth in the sense of, if I find my life fulfilling, then it is a good life for me. But what I find fulfilling in life is going to be very different from what you find fulfilling in life. We're going to have very different good lives, but we do all have the potential to have a good life. So it's allows for the adoption and flexibility from person to person, but we all are still in this crazy thing called life, and in it together, trying to figure out, well, what is my purpose and how do I fulfill that?
So that's fascinating to me, because so here we have virtue ethics. To me means, or it strikes me to mean, that there is something that's virtuous that we have in common, that is kind of, beyond the individual. But then now, with your answer to that last question, you strike me then now to be a pretty radical individualist at the same time. Is that something you can reconcile? What is virtuous seems to have in it the question even of virtue, seems to me, I mean, as a sort of be defined in a social way, socially constructed, in other words.
There are definitely social impacts. There's social influence. That's for sure. That's not something to be ignored. But it depends on where the individual is and what kind of societies that impacts what our individual needs and fulfillment are. So you have that type of feedback coming in. But the interesting thing for me is the virtues across different cultures, across different societies. We do see patterns in what kind of virtues are praised and what kind of virtues, leave you feeling good at the end of the day. I'm going back to the emotion in that sense. For example, the virtue of being honest. There's right time and right place to be honest. There's right degrees of being honest, but generally across the board, across different societies, you see honesty as this is something that we uphold. So there is that.
I want to push back on this a little bit, because I think that there are some cultures that I've come across that seem to think that if you're honest, you're a sucker, which is really actually another type of ethic that says you ought to just get what you could think of it as an ethic. It seems kind of unethical to me immediately, but there are communities that hold this belief that you should not be a sucker, and therefore you sometimes have to lie or be dishonest, and that's part of their ethical system in a way. Is that supported? Is that supportable? Is that reasonable enough to be called an ethic or a virtue?
I wouldn't call that necessarily a virtue, but it is an understanding. It is an ethical lens. It's let's say a framework that people work through. a lot of times philosophers will put forward the idea of the little white lies. Where do those lie? If you are more of a deontological thinker, then you're going to say, well, that's a lie, done. That's bad. You're being dishonest. In terms of utilitarian, okay, depending on how it comes out at the end of the day, you could tell that lie, so on and so forth.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah,
Utilitarianism is basically if the lie serves the greater good for the greater number of people, whatever, I can say that that's always the
exactly.
Yeah.
Versus with virtue ethics, which is something that I think is really fascinating, is it all exists on a scale. So you've got basically think like the absolute candor, kind of like the Dutch, where they'll just say whatever on their mind. That's extreme honesty on one side. But then you have the other end where people just tell lies, they hide the truth, it's shady. Virtue ethics has everyone on that scale. You're in between these two, what are essentially vices if they're taken to the extreme. What you're trying to do as an individual with, again, the feedback, the influence of the society around you, is figure out where you need to be on that scale. So what is the right amount of honesty for me in this scenario? So it doesn't write out the possibility of, okay, I could tell a white lie in this moment because of X, Y, and Z influences outside, not because it justifies means to the end or ends to the mean or anything in between, but it's looking at me right now. I can say, I can tell a little white lie to my friend that, no, we didn't plan a surprise birthday party. We didn't plan a birthday party for you. When we plan a surprise birthday party, that's a good white lie in that moment, because that's the right amount of honesty that I'm telling in that moment. Which I know we can go into without that kid snowball.
It's such a slippery slope. Is Santa Claus real? Should you tell your children whether or not? Those sorts of stories. Yeah. And even if you know that, for example, that some religion is mostly made up, should we actually talk about that, or is that an infringement on someone's religious, how to say, is it rude? Yeah. It's a really interesting slippery slope, though, and it seems to me that the answer to that is there's a great variation of what the right answer is to this question. And when we build software that is made to scale, the danger there is that you have to place yourself, you're forced in a way, if you want to treat everyone the same way, which is also questionable of whether you should do that, because there are different demands. So maybe services should be much more tailored to local conditions. This is something I've talked to a guest recently on the show about. He told me about that. It's really kind of an interesting dilemma, if you will, right? Because when we build software, we endow it with some sort of ethical. It will be embodied with some ethical system that somebody has to decide on. What is the virtue that we want this software to portray, and where does that come from? It can become very, can become paternalistic. Is what I think. It's a danger. What do you think of that?
Yeah, there's also some fear as well. It's a smaller line of conversation, but there is a line of conversation in responsible ethical AI, this space about the fear that because Western cultures are so engaged in this topic, and essentially all the frameworks and regulations are coming out of the Western cultures, that we are embedding Western ethics and Western values over and above any other region, which, there is some truth to that. The interesting part to this is we're definitely, that scale factor puts us into a whole new philosophical thought experiment, if you want to call it. But we were never necessarily meant to have this level of scale. So we are facing these new questions of what do we do when we're at this scale? Because in the past, our impact, our level of impact was confined to our society, the people around us. Which in that case, it was fine to have the same value system because we all had the same value system. We're in the same society.
Well, now, if we're not segregated, right, then it becomes it can become a very local point of contention if you have a very non-segregated society where many different cultures come into contact. in the same
Yeah.
place like London, for example, right? Where you
Yeah.
don't have this idea of a homogeneous idea of what is virtuous. It can be radically different across the street from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, which is a great example. It's like London at scale, all of a sudden, and we're trying to design technology so
Yeah.
that it fits all of these different understandings of ethics and society and values, and that does become tricky. Um, this is where I like to fall back on the idea of universal truths and universal values that we are trying to pursue. You see these starting to arise a little bit in regulation, like this universal understanding of the need for transparency in our systems so that we understand what's happening in the systems, or our universal need for fair systems. How that looks in each society is different, which is where part of the problems of that translation are happening. But we do have those universal values that we're all chasing. When it comes to the change in the societies, this is a question that still hasn't been solved, but I'm very fascinated in this idea of agency in terms of societies and cultures, where there is an ability to adapt the technology to the actual culture instead of the culture having to adapt to the technology. A great example here actually is through a company called BlaBlaCar. They have their car sharing, not car sharing, ride sharing, kind of like, I know they're gonna hate that I say this. I have a good friend that works at BlaBlaCar, but it's like long distance Uber. He hates when I describe it that way, but it's app based, and in the majority of European countries, you pay in the app, just like you would on for like an Uber. You pay BlaBlaCar in the app, except for in Germany. In Germany, they had to switch over to a subscription model for access, but that was because people in Germany like to pay by cash. They were paying for these rides in cash. And so I use this I think this is a fantastic example, because BlaBlaCar went in and instead of saying, no, you're going to pay in the app because this is what we've decided and this is how you have to adapt to us, they went, okay, you're in Germany. We get that this is how culturally car sharing works or ride sharing works. So cool, we'll adapt our technology to fit how you already function and you work.
So BlaBlaCar is what it's called?
Car. Yeah, BlaBlaCar.
I think it seems like a simple approach that it seems like it shouldn't be that far-fetched in a way. But yeah, that's often not the case. So when you have the apps, they just sort of one fits all, and there is local feedback is discounted to zero as long as the revenue comes in, right? It's often very revenue based, and
but the interesting thing there though is that is a missed opportunity if they're not adopting. For example, back to BlaBlaCar, if they hadn't adopted to the German system, their use in Germany would be cut by at least 50% because people they're like, it's fine, I'll just find a different way to do a long distance car ride and I'll pay in cash because I prefer to do that than through the app.
Right.
So not adapting to those local ecosystems within reason, never, as you say, when you're building software, you don't listen to all the feature suggestions, otherwise you'd have this monster. But if you adapt within reason to the local culture, even just within continentally, country-wise minded, then that does actually open up a new potential in terms of revenue. It makes your business, your product more attractive because it's not so foreign.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, if you're solving people's problems and you're reasonably sure not to hurt them in other ways, you will do better. Then you will make more profit in the long run. This is what we're seeing also with these companies who are very, I want to say, have a lot of hubris in just pursuing their agenda. And at some point, what you see is it's not paying off. Actually, there's this point where it's not paying off. So then, virtue ethics can be adapted to local conditions, and it's not necessarily a universal virtue. But then, how far can it go? How far can it go? There are some virtues in the world that I would say I find very problematic. I don't know, if you're not a virgin, then I don't know. You where it can go. There are these virtues that I find very disagreeable. And why do I find them disagreeable? Why don't they find it disagreeable? And what can we do about these sorts of things where um, where where we have somewhat of a, I don't want to use the term clash of civilizations because I think that's a overhyped idea as well, because I don't think we're clashing as much as that idea would have us clashing. But in some areas we do have some real contentions, right? Real differences
No.
in what we would consider virtue, right? How it is to be right. And at some point, I would say that a responsible, ethical, responsible technology provider will draw the line in the sense and say, okay, well, your virtues are not working for me, and this is it's very tricky and a very difficult can of worms to open. I realize this, but I think we have to open all cans of worms.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's look, for example, at women's rights. We've got the protests happening in Iran right now, and based off of the regime's, let's say, ethical framework that they're working through, women do not have the same rights as men. Now, let me introduce something called moral maturity. This is this concept of over time, we as humans, we learn about our values. We learn about what we should value, what our virtues should be. It is a process that takes place over centuries, over decades, decades and centuries. But essentially, it's I have tried this virtue or I've tried these actions. I don't like the outcome. Therefore, I need to change my actions to align better with say something that I want or feel, and so I mature in my understanding of my morality.
But the problem is
Now,
that some people do seem to like those outcomes, and then they push back and they want to go back to some outcomes that we have generally thoroughly rejected. You see this in America. You see that in, I guess, Iran is still a strong example of this. They had a much different, more market oriented, much more, how to say, a freer society, and then they went and they went back to these other virtues, and they are now, and I would say a large population in Iran feels strongly behind those other virtues. And I think a similar thing is actually going on in the United States as well.
so we've got maturity in terms of individual, but we also have maturity in terms of society in general and how we build on it. The case with Iran, so what we've done as international on a global scale is we've come to an agreement actually on human rights, what we call human rights. Those are values that we've agreed on a global scale need to be respected. And the case with Iran is they're actually against how they are treating women is against the human rights of the women, which is the problem there, where we can actually say, I can say as an ethicist, no, that is not right. It doesn't matter what your ethical lens is, that is not right.
So human rights is also a very specific ethic to let our listeners in on this. Human rights is not actually, it's another approach. You could say as opposed to utilitarianism or as opposed to, and I'm not sure, how does that fit in? How do human rights fit in to virtue ethics as a system?
Yeah. So let me explain it in this way. If I were working with someone as an ethicist, working with them on their system, and we were talking about human rights, I'm using human rights as the baseline of like, you need to fulfill these human rights, otherwise we cannot enter into any discussion beyond this. We cannot look at any other virtues beyond this. Essentially what it means, and how we also incorporate regulation when it comes to work and ethics, is we're establishing baselines of this is the least that you have to do. If you are doing this, you're one step above illegal, great. Doesn't mean that you're actually achieving the ethical standard that you want to, but you do need to reach this base level. And human rights are a great base level because they are recognized on a global scale. And these have been developed over time and tested over time of, yes, this makes sense, that women and men have the same rights and that are equal in society. We've tested that over the time. We've agreed. We're trying to get there, but we've agreed that this is good.
Okay, then let me ask you another
scale.
question that's related to this then. I think it is related to this, and I don't know if everyone, and it's a bit controversial because there's a lot of people working in business in Dubai and United Arab Emirates. I even had a guest on recently on the show who works in the United Arab Emirates. Is it even ethical to do business with other groups of people who have a virtual system that is so opposed to the current, the one that we have, and you say is globally agreed to, but I don't think that is actually true. In the case of the whole Arabian Peninsula, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, right? They seem to have, to me, different virtues, and they don't agree to the universal ones that we're talking about. So it isn't really quite universal in that sense, to be honest, right? So if we have to say that there are some people who are not within that, who don't agree to even human rights, but they are a big force in technology development at the moment. They have a lot of money that they're getting through, well, traditionally, but they're shifting now. That Qatar has a lot of natural gas, for example, but they're doing also other things, and they're doing a lot of things in the technology space. So how do you feel about that when we're confronted with that?
Yeah, I have to say it feels similar to the question as an ethicist when people ask me, like, would you ever work with Facebook or Google? Because that's in responsible AI, those are kind of like the evil companies as well, where we're like, oh, we don't align with them, we can't work with them. And my answer is no, it's not wrong to do business. It's not wrong to do business, say with different cultures that you're not necessarily in agreement with their virtues, or companies. But you have to know, as an individual going in, you have to know where your lines are that you are not going to cross. And that's where it becomes tricky. So if you are doing business, and something happens where you realize, okay, well, you violated this human right, or you've crossed my line, you have to have enough bravery, actually, and enough backbone in that moment to say no and push back, which, again, is very difficult. So it's not bad to engage in business. Everyone's got a different place that they're coming in from, but you're going to need a strong backbone going into that. Otherwise, you will compromise your own ethics, your own self, if you do not know where your lines are and you do not have the courage to say no in those instances.
So you're saying that the bottom line is that the minimum line should be human rights. And so they should be respected by whatever project, I suppose, that you're engaged with. So you have to be at least conscientious of that as a minimum. So and then beyond that, whether you're virtuous or not, if you engage in partnerships with people who have radically different systems of virtue, and then also if you're serving customers or clients that have radically different systems of virtue, it must become a bit tricky.
Yes. Oh yeah, I'm not denying it. It is very, very tricky. That's what I mean of it's not wrong to engage. It's going to be very, very difficult though if you are actually going in and saying I'm going to stick to my values. It becomes very, very tricky. So that leaves it to the question of is the money worth you compromising your values? That's really what the trade-off is that you're making.
Absolutely. And so then I also want to ask you this question, because I feel pretty strongly that when we build AI, for example, or other technologies, that one thing that we should ask, instead of asking, is it good, or is that how does it shift power in the world? How does it basically give some people more power, and how does it perhaps even take away power from others? And how does that work? How does it distribute power in some way? What do you think, and how do you think that is related to virtue?
Power shifting in terms of virtue. Oof. So there is a very strong conversation around AI and data itself, and how that there's a lot of power concentrated in who has the data, who has the insights, who has the strongest technology. We're seeing tech companies have greater power and influence than governments, which is fascinating. The interesting point in terms of virtues and let me phrase it in this way: is whoever is implementing these mass systems that people are following or beholden to, it's the virtue system or the ethical system of whoever has developed this system that is actually being put in place. So in that case, the power rests still in who has the data, who's creating the AI, because they have power not only of influence, but they have power of this is what we will value on a global
Couldn't
scale.
you
Not
say,
even
okay,
this is what I as an
yeah,
individual.
so couldn't you say that in itself is not virtuous? That it just isn't a virtue that a few
Yeah.
individuals or a few big, how to call them, jubernauts, have all this power, and that it isn't distributed, and that in fact we should, and this is what several of my guests have now proposed, we should decentralize and engage in a more sharing economy or collaborative economy, whatever that means. And there is a show directly about this particular topic with Somil Gupta. And so it may be, you could think of this in terms of virtue, this power dynamic or this power distribution as a non-virtuous, according to some systems of virtue, it must be wrong, but I don't know how that relates to virtue ethics.
Yeah, I think now we're actually diverting a little bit more into political philosophy, but I do agree in the sense that I am a proponent of the decentralized movement. I do think that having these centralized points of power and control is not healthy, and it's funny because it's not like it's power is not a virtue. Power is not something like, oh, this is something really good that we need to uphold. No, it's something on a different scale. It's not a virtue. But the virtues of the individual empower what's getting communicated. And there's a lot of questions around, are the values of the people in power right now actually the values that we want? And
well,
I'm
okay.
also a little bit skeptical that
Yeah,
that
but
is
is
true.
it only a matter of value? Because to me, it's very difficult for Jeff Bezos to imagine, for example, what it is like to grow up with his technology in Kenya, for example, having contact with Amazon in Kenya, growing up, something like that, right? It would be impossible for him to understand, even if if he was a virtuous person. So it seems also to be not just that it's their virtues that are being embodied in this technology, but also that it's their understanding that is embodied in this technology.
Yeah. I would actually say that in some of these cases, what is lacking in terms of virtue is the virtue of humility, which is a virtue. And in that case, it's humility in the sense of recognizing, I do not have that understanding. Like as I'm Jeff Bezos, I do not have the understanding of a kid growing up in Kenya with access to Amazon. I don't have that understanding. Therefore, I cannot make informed decisions about that person's experience and how I can affect them. It's having that humility to understand that I need to listen first and understand how other people experience both their life and my technology, and know that I do not have all of the right answers. I have the right answers for me and my own personal life and my own understanding.
That seems to be a huge tall order. So they have to listen to, because the other object being that it should be scalable. That seems to be a virtue in San Francisco, where you are.
Yes, that's true.
So if you want something to be scalable, then that means that you want something to serve millions and billions of people and maybe improve their life. So there is also a utilitarian aspect to this. So to say, well, what can we afford not to do it, because it might really bring a lot of improvement to people's lives if we do this sort of scalable, big approach, and then sort of run over the virtues in a way of others, because we cannot actually possibly listen to, I don't know, 3 million, 20 million, 40 million people, I don't know, but we want to serve 40 million people. So how do we bridge this gap?
Yeah. Well, the first question I would ask is it an improvement according to you or an improvement according to the group you're trying to serve? That's a huge question. If I, as Olivia, think that I can bring improvement to a young boy living in China and I can improve his life according to my standards, am I actually improving his life according to him, his life? It's his life. So that's always the question that I like to flip on its head of, well, whose improvement are we going by? But no, I don't think this runs counterproductive to scale. I think what I'm trying to get across here is with scale, with that level of scale, we increase our responsibility for actually listening to not 3 million people, but groups and societies and cultures within that 3 million to understand how we are actually impacting, where you see, okay, this is taking off in a small rural town in China. Okay, what is actually the experience of that small little town in China as we're taking up? So yes, it is with greater scale comes greater responsibility, if we're going to play words on the Spider-Man quote. But when you reach that level of scale, you don't get to come in and say, this is how it's done. You do need to listen to the people you are serving and adjust for how they are being served. I think that's the point again about power is you don't, and that lack of humility, you don't know what's best for other people. You can help and provide.
This kind of scale, you should really not expect it to be very hierarchical, the structure, and you should actually expect the structure to be much more distributed across closer to the stakeholders. I think that is sort of my view on that. But
which again creates better services and products.
But it requires a lot of thinking, and I guess there's a lot of different angles to go about it that I'm learning about as I'm going along. So this is very good. But I wanted to ask you one more question here about measurability and metrics. So we live in this world where we expect metrics. We're data scientists, and to some degree, we're all data scientists now. And we need to know what we're measuring. Right? So how do we measure virtue? It seems to me that it's in conflict with the idea of measurement, virtue that is.
It is difficult. You can't measure. You can't go in saying I'm the most humble.
Oh my God!
Kind of counterproductive.
It sounds like an oxymoron.
Exactly, but there are other ways to measure. There is a great line of thinking that I really enjoy, which is the triple bottom line, where you're looking at people, planet, profit, all on the same score. So if people are suffering at the price of profit and planet is suffering at the price of people and so on, then it's not a successful system. But instead putting those three on the same playing field, that itself, there's virtue sewn into the seams there of we are honoring life and we are honoring environment. That's being sewn into just how we're measuring our productivity, how we're measuring our metrics. So there are ways to embed it into how we currently measure our metrics.
Let me ask you this: from what perspective, or how are you? Where do you derive the inspiration for your virtue? From what tradition?
From my
what
virtues.
tradition? Or how do you? Because I think when you say people, planet, profit, it seems to me a little bit. Some of that sounds like it could come from, for example, indigenous communities. So I don't know how do you derive? Where do you derive your virtues from? What is let's say the most the books that influenced you the most, or the authors or the experiences that have influenced you the most in your pursuit of virtue?
Yeah. Okay. And I really like this question, and I want to stress here though that I have influences on my personal understanding, my personal virtues. But when it comes to my work as an ethicist, one of the things I do is detach from my own value system, and I take a critical look at the individual's value system, the society they're in, the regulations that they're against. So as an ethicist, you actually have to practice detaching from your own ethical framework to be able to understand where the other person's coming from. But my own personal ones, I think actually one of the biggest influences growing up is I love C.S. Lewis. I discovered C.S. Lewis through the Chronicles of Narnia, which is a great kind of like the Harry Potter fandom, its own little series. But C.S. Lewis was also a philosopher. He has some great works like pieces on grief, pieces on human understanding, and just these fantastic approaches to understanding life and emotions and morals. And I think he's got one book called The Great Divide, which is essentially about what is the Catholic Church's understanding of purgatory.
Mm-hmm.
But I absolutely love this book because it's about these souls that they're on their way to the afterlife, but they're stuck at this kind of in-between space. And it's the story of one soul going around and talking to the other souls of like, hey, why are you here? What's going on? And each of the souls that he's talking to, they're all hung up on something in life. They're all hung up on, one is a mother that lost a child, and she's so focused on the loss of this life that she wasn't able to actually continue living her own life. And even in the afterlife, she's still stuck on this point. There's ones where he's talking to another soul, and this soul was gluttonous, so constantly eating, and was so focused on that they weren't able to fully experience life in other ways because they were always focused on more food. But I absolutely love that book because it was looking at in life, what are you so attached to that you're missing the bigger picture, that you are sacrificing everything in your life to have this one thought or this one need or this one aspect. There's no balance to it. So I think not only that book, but a lot of writing by C.S. Lewis.
It's a particularly Christian perspective then, right? Or is it Catholic, you even said?
Yeah. So I was born into an Irish-Italian family, so I had no choice but to be Catholic growing up. But yeah, a lot of my early understandings and virtues came out of the Catholic Church. I read a lot of Thomas Aquinas and Seven Deadly Sins. I think it's fascinating. So I know for my personal values, a lot of it's heavily influenced by Christianity, by the Catholic Church. I say to take everything with a grain of salt because on the flip side, all of my philosophical understandings that through my various degrees, I've studied everything from Nietzsche to Kant to Mills to Hume, all of the different perspectives. And I think what that taught me between my personal value system growing up and then the value systems that I've studied is that there is no one right answer and that we need a balance. That you need to draw on all of these different aspects and to understand as well. It takes a level of self-awareness, but to understand, this is where I'm heavily influenced. This is where my values are heavily influenced, and to understand if maybe I'm talking to you, Johannes, and we're disagreeing on something and I realize, oh, well, it's because I've got this influence on my value system and you've got an opposite one. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, but you're building away, I suppose, right? You're in this dialectic between what is coincidental about your experience, what were you exposed to. In a way, you could say that your parents being Catholic is somewhat coincidental. Well, not coincidental, it's cultural. It's a sort of a given. It's and then there is this conscious part where you feel drawn to certain ways of thinking. Is how my experience is. And then there are also somewhat traumatic experiences potentially that play into this as well, and what moves you and what pushes your buttons basically in the space of ethics. That's my experience in any case.
I think a good way of or how I try and describe it is we as humans, we're still learning about morality, we're still learning about ethics. It's not a hard science yet because we're still figuring things out around it. The joke in philosophy is it's called philosophy until there are rules and laws, and then it's a science. So morality is not a science yet because we're still figuring it out. And it's kind of it's got this layer of mystery, which I find to be beautiful. But it's got this layer of mystery. And so we as humans, we're just trying to interpret it. So we've got different value systems.
I think there seems to be something fundamentally different to science, though, in the sense that there seem to be some irreconcilable or not irreducible differences in axioms that make this thing it makes this thing sort of solvable in a unique way, even in the long run. So there is not, I think, even a conceivable way to bring things into alignment of all sorts into alignment, because there will be some things that will always be not really quite fitting well. So whereas in science, you can optimize a function, and you're optimizing one metric, which is of explanation in science usually. Yeah. But here you're trying to optimize things simultaneously that don't really fit. I think this is for example, in the case of bias. So we say we don't want an algorithm to be biased in one way or the other, right? So then we have two ways of being unbiased, and I brought this up in another episode as well. So and you have the bias of, for example, in recidivism. I think is an interesting case here. So you have two biases. And in addition to that, you have the rule that justice should be blind to a lot of categories. And exactly what that means is very difficult, because there's a lot of correlation. As Shamika Klassen has stated on that episode, what's the problem here is you have a lot of things that correlate with the protected classes, if you will. So even to be blind is not so easy. But then if you're blind, how can you know that you're not biased? You can't know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that is very paradoxical, right? There's this paradoxical nature to ethics, which seems to me, even in the long run, irreconcilable or unsolvable in that way, no matter how long we
potentially
learn. Well, it seems to me like you cannot solve this problem, right? It's pretty clear that you cannot both be blind and unbiased, and be sure to be unbiased. So these are not things that work well together.
But maybe down the line in the future, we find a way where maybe that aspect of being blind is not actually what we need to be valuing. Maybe it actually needs to be changed itself. Maybe we do actually need to be aware so that we do provide justice across the board in a way that seems or appears that we are blind to different factors.
You see, that's the thing. I mean, if you're not really blind, right, you might be. You might. It's a very tricky problem. It's not something I'm hoping we're going to solve tonight, but or today, depending on where you are. But it's just something to think of, and I feel like there is something. Also, even in science, I would say, we now know, thanks to Gödel, that it is impossible that we will ever have an answer to every question. So every question that has true as an answer, for example, cannot be necessarily proven to be true. And this is going to be perpetual. So and in ethics, I think you're even dealing with a much more dicey problem, I think, than you're dealing with when it comes to science questions.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, we may have a branch of ethics come out that's more scientifically based. Who knows? In thousands of years, we're still developing, and I find that ethics and morality is this great frontier of thought that we've been exploring for thousands of years, and we still are slowly but surely making our way through it. And to me, that's something really beautiful. That yes, in my lifetime, we're not going to have all the answers, but I can work and I can provide thought and experience to maybe get us a little bit closer.
So how do you feel then about, this is a good little probe for another question. How do you feel about the enormous speed at which we're developing technology? And you see, it seems to me that there's a mismatch in the way that we're developing in terms of thinking about ethics and the way that we're developing technologies and just trying things out.
Yeah. Well, I think in this case, so maybe it's a bit controversial, but I do think in this case, what we're doing right now is we're trying to apply our current value system, our current understanding of ethics to our technology. Yes, that is in some cases actually just flat out missing in our technology, which that needs to be fixed. But overall, looking at the technology, we have this great opportunity of, as the speed and the caliber at which our technology is being created, what can our technology actually tell us about us as humans and our, back to the original question, our human nature. For example, we were saying, oh, we're fine, we're fair as a society. And then we have these systems being built and we're looking at it going, what is all this bias in here? That bias is not in the system, it's in our society. What that should be doing is not us, that's not a technical problem. That's not, we need to fix the system. It's, we actually need to fix society. We're not actually as unbiased, we're not as fair as we think we are. So that is the opportunity there of, sure, let's expand and let's grow the technology. But what is the technology telling us about us as a society that we can grow as a society? And again, feed back into the technology.
But it does real things, right?
is-
It affects elections. That are
Yeah.
suddenly it starts
yeah.
affecting elections. Suddenly it starts affecting things in the world. It's radically undoing or redoing our life. As
Yeah.
we're starting to think about what is the good life, we're at a very fast rate transforming it. That could be
Yeah.
scary
Well,
in a particular perspective. I mean, if you're thinking about
Oh,
these
yeah.
things together, it could appear as a very scary thing.
Yeah, I think it can be very scary. But we need to be able, as both on a societal and an individual level, have the backbone of, hey, we tried that did not work. We do not like that outcome. Let's change it. Let's not keep doing it. I think that's what's the scary part, is we're lacking that backbone right
So
now.
outcomes, but
Both-
outcomes, that's like, you sound now like a utilitarian a little bit, because virtues are
maybe a little in that case.
yeah,
but
because virtues should be independent of outcome even.
yeah, well, you've got, think of it as this in this direction of, you've got your first layer. I'm making decisions on a system that I have never done before. I'm experimenting, cool, but at least I'm experimenting within my frame of reference, within my virtues. I'm not making any decisions that compromise my baseline. Now I'm looking at the outcomes, and those outcomes, oof, I didn't actually really like those outcomes. Let me adjust what my baseline is, and that feeds back in, and we grow from there. The problem is we're missing the baseline to start with, and then we're not even taking in the feedback from the outcomes. So we're just missing this entire, essentially, it's the mechanism of moral maturity. We're missing that muscle right now in how we're developing technology.
I think we still are in a great way. So you're trying to fix that, right? With
Slowly but surely, chipping
yeah,
away at it. Yeah.
So am I. We're both in the same boat, and I think that a global discussion is my answer to it, in a way, to start that and to talk about how technology serves us in different areas of the world, to bring that closer to home, in a way, to bring the world closer to home in terms of how technology works. It's definitely a learning process. All of it must be. And I think that's an ethic in itself, the ethic to learn and to discover. And hopefully we are able to build some guardrails, though. If we are developing very fast, it seems to me the speed difference is this difference in speed in terms of what we're developing our thinking. We're always running behind bad outcomes, it feels like. And it feels like that is, so maybe even going so fast is not a virtue. I don't know what do you think about that? Do you think in terms of the speed of innovation, in terms of a virtue, is that something we can choose, or is that something that happens to us?
At the moment, it feels a bit like it's happening to us. I think a lot of our structure has been built around, build fast and break things. That became its own virtue. But I think we're at a point in time where we actually need to question that and look at it and go, is that a virtue?
Broken it.
No, that's not. It's causing.
Ouch.
Yeah, we broke a lot of things. How about let's change this to fix things, and we don't have to move at a snail's pace, but we should at least fix all the things we keep breaking. Just, it's looking at different values. If anything to an extreme is always going to be a vice. We've taken speed to an extreme to the point where it might actually be working against us. It's okay to develop innovatively, slightly slower, if that means we are developing innovatively, not in terms of the technology, but in terms of our ethics and the values of our technology are developing at the same space, at the same pace of our technology. Like there's something's out of balance here, and I think as a society we're still trying to pinpoint where that imbalance is. But that's kind of what we're struggling with in terms of that speed. We've taken the speed a little too far. How do we bring it back a little bit, and what needs to be placed in balance with that That's
I have a feeling it has something to do with the framing. We often talk about technology as if we were in a race with, say, China, for example. So if we're talking it in those
yeah.
terms, right? If we see it as a race, then we are naturally,
Then we need
yeah,
speed.
exactly. Then speed is an enormous virtue because we're afraid of falling behind.
Yeah.
And I guess that is tied into this as well. And I don't know, to what
Yeah.
degree do you see that as a virtue? Do we have to be ahead of China? What does that mean to be ahead of China? And do you think that that is an ethic to be ahead of China?
No, that's not. That's it's definitely not a virtue to be ahead of China. That'd be a very interesting virtue. But it is a frame of mind, and um, I think with it, the question, like you were just saying, is what does it mean to be ahead of China? Is
Yeah.
this a terms of quantity? Is it a terms of quality? Is
Well,
it, do we need to have as invasive and pervasive technology as China? Is that actually the direction that we
well,
want, or do we want a different type of
surely military
technology?
will play a role in this. So because a lot of
Yes.
technology is tied to military innovation, if you will, and how we can bomb each other better. And we have
True.
to be sure that we do it better than the Chinese, because who knows, maybe they'll attack Taiwan. So do you have any thoughts on that? Is that not tied to the speed of innovation, actually, in some weird and maybe perverse way?
Yeah. But then I would like to pose the question here is, do we need better weapons or do we need better security? Can we actually have innovation in terms of how in our security rather than in our weapons? When we are trying to combat against the weapons in China, it's looking, instead of like, okay, I'm bringing. I think it's a song that goes, "I'm bringing a lemon to a knife fight." It's like, do I need to bring a bigger knife or do I need to bring a lemon and confuse the person and do something completely different? Like, it's innovation does not just mean doing what the other person is doing better than that other person. It could be doing something completely different and in the opposite direction, but having similar outcomes, or you know, innovation doesn't have to be, I'm going to build a bigger gun than you. My innovation could be, I'm going to build better security.
Brings me to another question that I've been grappling with. Is it not also true that innovation isn't just a monolith? So it seems to me that we are innovating not enough, for example, on really important questions having to do with climate change, having to do with adjustments and working conditions, having to do with really important problems for humans that we're facing. But we're actually innovating a lot in sort of gimmicky kind of things, and we're spending a lot of energy in those gimmicky kind of what we call it also innovation. So it seems to me we're using the same term for radically different things.
Yeah, I think a great point here is with the Chat GPT. I've been in discussion with, I've been talking with friends of, I mean, what does this actually have in terms of application? Is this innovative, or is it just a really cool chatbot? We're using it for media. Is that innovation, or is that just a new type of media? And so it's these questions of like, all the innovation that we have, if it's just going into better advertising and more content creation, is that actually innovation, or are we just doing more of the same thing at a bigger scale? No, I think we're at a point in time where we need to actually question what is our definition of innovation as a society. Is it better targeted ads, or is it something completely
Yeah, this
different
is
than that?
precisely a question that I want to tackle on this show. This is definitely and what it means in different contexts as well. What does that actually mean? Innovation. What should it mean? What can it mean? What has it meant? And so on. It's not a matter of how do we define it, but what does it do for us? I think, and it's the way I think of it. I think it is innovative if it does a lot of things that are really useful for us. And I don't necessarily include bombing other people better in that category. So I don't know that even
Yeah.
if that's measured in the GDP, and we could say there's this concept of solo residual, which is an innovation index in macroeconomics. And if we have a lot of that, it measures roughly something like the speed of ideas and how it improves in a way that it contributes to the GDP. But this thing will not really tell us what this innovation was used to do. It will tell us how much money it brought in some way. And I guess that sort of means, in some way, will tell us something about the economy and how it is doing for people and jobs and so on. But it won't tell us really who at the end of the day will consume this innovation and do what they will be enabled to do with this innovation. And in a way, we would want some measurement of that, right? Of that innovation, like the speed of innovation in a way that it expresses human empowerment. And we don't have anything like that. What do you do? What are your metrics that you advise your clients to look at?
It really is client dependent, because what we have to do is take a combination of, here is what's required by law. Here are factors of usually we bring in factors of ESG. But then also let's discuss with you as a company what your goals are, and how do we deduce from there what kind of metrics you should be embedding into your culture. It's really client dependent, but we have that baseline of what is legally required, what in terms of ESG are you lacking in, and then as a company, in terms of your vision and the values of the company, what can we deduce from there in terms of metrics that you should be
so do you agree with this? Because I think that in the end of the day, ethics is it's all about what metrics you, in large part, it's about what metrics you optimize, right? Because, for example, the optimization of attention leads to crazy, foreseeable side effects. You know that if a racist comes into a bar and says something outrageous, racist, we will all pay attention to this person because we are wired to pay attention to them. So if the algorithm is given as its objective to maximize engagement, it will do weird things like recommend racist materials. And this is, you could say that the ethics are embedded in the metrics that you optimize. Is that not true? And how does that relate to virtue?
Yeah. So when you're optimizing for different, this is where in terms of virtue ethics, I don't really like the term optimization, because it has this implication or this knock-on effect of taking something out of balance and taking it to the extreme. Which is where we start to have a problem, is if you are optimizing for only one metric, you will have problems. You do need a balance of different metrics that you are quote unquote optimizing for, or you are balancing between. And a lot of it is fine tuning. A lot of it you need to actually critically think and go, okay, how is this optimization, or how is this focus on this metric? What kind of outcomes are coming out of that? And do we need to adjust from that? With social media, we were trying to optimize for a long time for attention on the screen. We saw actual impact, how that increased suicide rates, how that decreased our sense of worth. And we should have looked at that and gone, nope, that's out of balance. We need to fix that. Something that is not the right metric to optimize for. What can we balance?
But the machine won't allow you
instead?
To do that. So once you're in that point, so this is another thing. There is something bigger about this. Something you could say societal about it. So if you're in the shoes of Mark Zuckerberg, and you realize that attention maximization causes higher suicides and all of these other things, and you have, on the other hand, you have these investors who say you have to keep increasing the number of users and you have to keep doing this and advertisements have to do really well because we want our return on our investment. So you're in this kind of very stressful situation, because if you pull the plug on this optimization, your entire business model will fall in on itself. So you have to, in fact, change your business model. This is something I've been arguing for, is that you have to actually design your business model around your, you could say, virtues, ethics, or your ethical principles, I suppose.
Yeah, I say honestly, the more work I do with smaller companies and startups as an ethicist, the less I'm actually working on the technology and the more I'm working on the business model. 9 times out of 10, it's the problem's either rooted in the business model or in the culture of the company, not actually in the technology, which is
so if you basically, in other words, if you have an algorithm that very effectively optimizes a very bad metric, then more effective this algorithm,
the algorithm's doing great.
In terms of ethics, the better they are. So you have to actually align your business model with your ethical principles, and then derive the metrics from there. And then when you maximize these metrics, they should lead to good outcomes, I suppose. That's also what I've come to.
Yeah. And you got to leave a little room in there of, hey, okay, maybe that wasn't right, or we need to adjust a little bit from there. You're not going to get it right from the first start. That's okay. You just need to have the backbone to say, we need to change and we need to adjust. So start from a
So
good
also that
foundation.
depends on the circumstance too, because
Yeah.
if you're doing something medical, let's say some medical AI person,
Yeah,
oops,
exactly. You're
we
like,
lost,
oh, we
yeah,
killed a few people.
oops, we lost a few.
Yeah. Can't
Yeah,
really
yeah,
do
yeah.
that. No, you
Yeah.
need to have good
The
foundations.
caution, I
Yeah.
think, changes depending on the magnitude. So that, I guess I find
Yeah.
myself inevitably be a utilitarian in this area where you have to say that there are trade-offs in every case, and the stronger that
Yeah.
you end up being, the more sensitive, the more is at stake in terms of costs, I suppose, ultimately, and in terms
Yeah.
of benefits also. But so it is a utilitarian calculation at the
Yeah.
end of the day, even though I'm always very much at odds with this approach, but sometimes it's irreducible to it, actually. Like, I mean, it is,
Yeah.
you can't escape it. You realize that it is about trade-offs and costs and benefits at some point. And do you find that as well?
Yeah.
And so virtue ethics can be well aligned with utilitarianism then. Do you see a conflict?
No, I don't. I don't see a conflict. What I often tell people is that it's best to actually apply a few different ethical frameworks or schools of thought to one scenario, because then it gives you a better rounded position. I subscribe to virtue ethics. I am a huge supporter of virtue ethics, but I still work with people in terms of, well, from utilitarian perspective or deontological perspective. I don't usually use those direct jargon words, but from this perspective, this is how this action or this decision will be perceived. Because again, there's shortcomings in all of these schools of thoughts. I just so happen to think that virtue ethics is the strongest, but I'm not discrediting utilitarian or deontological. I think there's a lot to learn from those schools of thought as well, and in applying them and the perspectives that
So,
come
what do
out
you
of them.
find the strongest about virtue ethics in particular? I have to follow up on this when you said that, because clearly one would want to know. What do you see as the biggest strengths
True, true.
of virtue ethics and what it brings to the table that other systems don't?
What I see as a strength in virtue ethics is actually coming into innovation and the opportunity around how we look at our values. Because with virtue ethics doesn't focus on, let me avoid doing wrong. I don't want to do bad. Let me avoid doing bad. It actually looks at how do I embody this value? How do I embody this virtue to the utmost? So how do I how can I have the right amount of courage in the right situation? It's focused on more of this proactive, forward-facing, what opportunity can be found there. Virtue ethics to me has two sides, embodies both sides of the coin of ethics. It's let me avoid doing wrong, but also let me do good. Ethics is the pursuit of the good life. How do I have a life of fulfillment and purpose? A life of fulfillment and purpose is not a life where I didn't get in trouble. It's a life where I actually did good and am doing good and I'm following my purpose. So for me, that's what virtue ethics has that the other schools of thought don't necessarily have. The other schools of thought are looking at avoiding bad or not following the rules or maximizing good at the cost of what can also be blown out of proportion and have some very negative knock-on effects. Virtue ethics has more flexibility. It requires that critical thought of actually understanding that level of self-awareness of understanding, which is for me why I think it's personally why I think it's one of the strongest schools of thought.
Does it have a particular set of pillars, like principles, if you will, axioms?
Well, it depends on what base of virtues you're coming from. I guess if we're talking about Thomas Aquinas here, he's a fun one to base on. He's got his 7 deadly sins and the virtues that come out of that, and you could base it on those as pillars, or you can base it on, I mean, if we're looking at technology in the modern day, you can base it on the pillars that the high-level expert group from the European Union has laid out for AI. You can supply the different virtues. You can implement the different virtues through this school of thought, which again, just
So it's
why I
agnostic
like it.
to a particular set of virtues. It's a plug and go system, similar to, you could say, well, yeah, I mean, and it is in a way, it is a little bit like that. So when you have this, what is it called, value sensitive design, I think is that related
Yeah,
to virtue ethics.
I believe actually it is primarily based on virtue ethics, if I remember correctly, because it's designing for values. You select your values and you design for them. Um,
So then I know a little bit
yeah,
about it. So that, yeah, I also find that an interesting approach, that you have this base that you, how to say, processes and systems in place that you can plug in, values of the people who are affected. I always think that the values of those who are affected should be the ones guiding the development of technology, rather than the value of the people who are building the technology, who should be at the service of those who are affected.
yeah.
But how do you feel is your how do you feel about that, and do you have a way to do that, to connect to the people who are affected by the systems you advise to build?
Yeah. I think what I advise is let it be a conversation. It's a collaboration between the people designing the technology and the people that are affected by the technology. Um, it should be a conversation, a collaboration between the two. Um, you get that through user feedback, through actual understanding of perspectives of people in the culture, in the experience that you are affecting. But it's important to be able to take in their considerations into how the technology is being built. But then there are certain restrictions to the technology where the people developing it need to say, okay, well, that's outside of the scope, or that doesn't quite work there, or that's not how we can make it work. It's neither here or there. It's not this absolutely every single need of the user must be met, or it's only up to the developer. That needs to be a conversation. That needs to be a
Fantastic.
collaboration.
Well, I think that covers pretty much what I had thought about in terms of what we could speak about. And so I guess it's a good time to end it here, but I want to first give you an opportunity to tell the listeners and the viewers, about whatever you want to tell them, what you want to have them take away with them at the end of the day.
Very open-ended. Yeah. Um, no, I would just say that right now it's very tempting to get overwhelmed quickly by ethics or responsible AI, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of doom and gloom around it, but I think it's actually a very hopeful and inspiring field. It's a place of curiosity. It's a place for us as humans to go. Is this what we want? We've reached a point in time in humanity itself where we have the opportunity to sit and go, is this actually what we want? Or do we want to take control and change it? And that requires a whole lot of backbone and a lot of bravery, but we have it. We have the ability to do this. It's up to us now if we are going to. So I believe we are. And I'm one of the fighters that's trying to help and build in that direction. But yeah, I think this is a great time of opportunity. It's not something to be feared. It's something to run headfirst into.
Fantastic. Well, lastly, I want to just ask you, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to stay in touch with you, if they want to find out more about you, where can they do that? And I obviously will have that also in the bottom of where the comment section is.
Yeah. Well, I am on LinkedIn and Twitter. My name on both, Olivia Gambelin, on both LinkedIn and Twitter. You can also check out my website, which is just www.oliviagambelin.com. I usually keep that pretty up to date, and you can also, I think there is a contact. I had to remember. I built that website. There's a contact form there as well if you want to reach out. I do get back to everyone. Sometimes it takes me a little while, but feel free to reach out. I always love discussing and chatting with people about the space.
This show is published in video format on YouTube, and in audio format on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and many others every Wednesday at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 a.m. in Los Angeles, and 10 a.m. in London. Please leave your comments in the comment section. If you like something, please let us know. And if you don't like something, please also let us know. Give us a thumbs up for things you like as well. This helps the algorithm. And also, please subscribe so that you don't miss a show and that you keep in contact with us. Join the conversation. Next week, I will be meeting with Yasmin Al-Duri, and we will be conversing about the Web3 movement.
Web3, and some people even call it Web 3.0. They're sometimes seen as a synonym, and sometimes people say no, they're not the same. Basically, what the goal for both of these ideas is that we have a kind of web that is decentralized from these big powers.